Very complex machine, and that this guy Kirk has incredible resources at his fingertips. As a dramatic design, it's unparalleled. It's one of the most amazing science fiction designs for a spaceship ever. And you know how you know that? Not just because you loved it when you first saw it, but that 50 years later, it still looks cool. And usually science fiction design is the most fleeting of design. The audiences are very sophisticated now. You know, the thing was that Matt Jeffries never got hung up with the idea that it was science fiction. He never treated it like science fiction. He treated it as if it was real. You know, if you'll watch shows like, for instance, and this is not to criticize because I love these shows too, you know, like Lost in Space or Buck Rogers, the designs often were a little on the goofy side. And it was because the production designer and the producer said, it's science fiction. You know, you can do anything with it, it doesn't really matter. Gene and Matt, these were both very practical guys who both served in the Army Air Corps during World War II. Matt was a flight engineer on a B-17. He flew missions over Africa against Rommel. Gene was a pilot on a B-17 in the Pacific. You will see a lot of influence of the B-17 actually. And if you look at the Enterprise, the miniature itself, there's a lot of pieces of B-17 in there, and it's really remarkable. The more you look at it, the more you see. What's interesting about the way, it's important that you feel enclosed in a ship. But in those days, they had to pour a lot of light into these sets because of the sensitivity of the film. So you had to leave the tops of the sets open. When we did shows like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and stuff like that, the film stock, and we started using HD video, you could shoot in very low light conditions. You could shoot here. I mean, everybody can with their phones now, you know. But back then, they had to leave the ceiling open. And in order to maintain the idea that you were enclosed in a ship and still leave room for lighting, they added these headers up above. And with the headers, you could line up the camera, see that you were actually enclosed, and never see the light. You know, when we did the mirror episode of Enterprise, one of the things, and this was Mike Okuda's idea, which is an elegant, beautiful idea, and I'm sure these are things Matt never thought about, because Matt, as a production designer, generally only concerned himself with stuff that told a story. When we did our shows later on, we were big fans of Matt, and we were such geeky fans that we figured out how things work that were never needed on the show, you know. I mean, one of the thing that Mike came up with was like these sections of wall. On the mirror episode, we had them on tracks, and you could pull this whole section of wall out like a drawer, and there would be circuitry and stuff in there. That is such a, yeah. I remember when I was a kid, they used to have a TV. They said works in drawer. Do you remember that, works in a drawer? So we had works in a drawer here. You know, one of the funny things is that I remember talking to Matt about, we used strips of aluminum in here, shiny aluminum, in between these panels. And Matt said, oh my God, you guys had money. Because you know what they used to do on the original show? He would take masking tape and stretch it out and spray paint it with silver paint. And then they would put spray paint and silver paint masking tape in here to do that, you know. I mean, the extent that we went to try to recreate some of the stuff, like this piece over here, and a little planton on the wall, a mechanical device happening over there. That stuff was dumpster leavings. You know, John Dwyer, who was the set decorator on the show, a huge guy, was like 6'5", and he used to go diving in dumpsters and pulling out junk and painting them and putting them on a board and sticking them on the wall. And when those guys saw the diagrams I did to recreate those things, they roared. They thought that was the funniest thing they ever saw, that I was doing these highly technical, careful diagrams of garbage. They couldn't believe it. They thought it was absolutely astonishing. Further down the hall here, we've got this wonderful alcove. I always love this. One of the great things about it was that there's a ladder in here. The ladder tells you that there are other levels to the ship. It's a brilliant thing. We had them on the Enterprise D and Voyager and stuff like that. Usually they were in vertical Jeffries tubes, you know. But I remember seeing this as a kid and loving it so much. But Matt told me a funny story. If you come around, you'll see there's a sign in here that says Environmental Engineering Personnel Only. And Matt said he made that sign, and they shot all day long during the pilot of people rushing back and forth, going about their business that they could use as stock later on. At the end of the day, someone points out to Matt that he spelled environmental wrong. He left the N out. It said environmental engineering. Of course, Matt was really upset because a day of shooting, that's a lot of money. So he had to go to Gene Roddenberry and tell him that he screwed up the sign. And he was really worried about it. I mean, you could get in a lot of trouble. And to show you what kind of guy Gene Roddenberry was, Gene said, Matt, don't worry. I'll write a memo that says the Enterprise has an environmental department. You know, when we did Trials and Tribulations, this grill, the internet, we had computers, but the internet had not really blossomed yet. And you couldn't just go on the internet and type in, you know, architectural screen and find 2,000 things and find what you're looking for. We had 2 weeks to do do the research, do the diagrams, build the sets, paint them, light them, and get ready to shoot. So we could not turn it up. We couldn't find it anywhere. And Herman Zimmerman, a production designer, who, you know, he cares about this stuff, but we got to shoot. And he says, you know, we'll find something sort of like it and put it in there. And I remember Okuda and I were so distraught over that. And we were leaving the stage, and stage is dark and cold, and you open the door and there's that bright California sun and you're blind for like a minute, you know, and you got to reorient. And I look down, and Backlot is digging a trench. They're replacing plumbing, a piping under the street. And I look, and there's this vinyl mesh stretched around the hole. And it's almost exactly this, not as thick, but exactly this pattern and size. And I remember I grabbed Mike, and I drag him around, and I just like, and we ran back, and we got a pair of clippers, and we clipped out a piece that would fit here. Maybe someone fell in there, I don't know, it was our fault. But, and we took it to Herman, and Herman had it painted and put it in a frame, and we stuck it in there, and you know, and the rest is history. You know, I remember when we built the set, I was just telling the other group that if you don't get along with the mill who builds the sets, they don't like you, you gave them a hard time. If something goes wrong on a set that you built, they won't care, you know, because you were a son of a gun, you know. But I remember when I came down, they moved so fast that one night there were tape marks on the floor where all the walls were going to go. The next morning, Okuda and I walked down and all the walls were up. Overnight. And I walk over and I look, and this header is not there. It's open all the way up. And I'm like, and I can see Greg Medina, one of the mill guys, who cares what I think, because he likes me, is looking at me and he says, Dougie, what's wrong? And I said, well, that's all right, no one will ever. He said, no, tell me. And I told him, and within 2 hours they had put a header in. And it happened a couple of places on the set. It's just, it pays. Get along with the mill guys, because if they don't like you, you're not going to get what you want. And they were great guys. It's just, you can't believe what they could build overnight. See, here's another one of those dumpster things. This is the one that Spock hit with a bowl of plumbing soup. Of course, you got Commander Spock's quarters right over here. Building these things is just so much fun. I mean, when I did diagrams of these and we sent them out to the prop guys and they made them and they would bring them in, it was like Christmas to get that stuff. You're going to hear me say this a lot today, but oh my God, this is an amazing set. This is an amazing set. And it's really a great example of Matt Jeffries' ability to put together very simplistic lines and make them look incredibly sophisticated. I mean, look at this design. Almost anybody can build this if you got a saw, you know? But it's done with such style and such class. and all open on one side. And the idea there was that you could move fast, and they had to move fast. You would have all of your equipment, your sound, your camera, everybody was out there. And Bob Justman could write up a schedule that could start in the wardroom, go to the next set, and all they had to do was roll all the equipment down. That's for speed. You know, I visited the Food Network in Manhattan once, and they had a premium on space, and all 4 walls were a different cooking show. So you would shoot, you know, so-and-so doing her cooking, and then you would just move your cameras over this way, and now you were doing this other guy doing his cooking show, and then when he was done, they would roll it over this way. So it's all built for speed. This place is built for speed, and what's interesting is that there are very few drama shows, even in the 60s, that were modeled after sitcom sets. This is a sitcom set. You know, in a way, you know, I like that he's got it enclosed, but I sort of wish it was open so we could see the way it was actually on the show.
No, you don't.
You don't want to see what's on those.
But, yeah, look at this. I don't know where James finds these things. I mean, this is the exact gurney that I think we first saw it in A Private Little War when Spock is shot. They wheel this into the transport room and pull him out. But, yeah, it's a masterpiece of design. See that sign over there? That was from Menagerie, where they go see the injured Captain Pike with Malachi Throne. Gorgeous. Fantastic. But look at, see this design work, the lines, they work with the bed. You'll see it all through the ship. You'll see it in all of Matt's designs, and the beautiful thing about it was not only was it economical and easy to build, but it showed a thread of design that ran through the entire ship and gave everything a cohesiveness that made you feel like there was a design department that worked. You know, it's like if you go on a naval vessel, you'll notice the same thing. And plus the other thing was that when we did like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and those other shows, we had like 12 people in the art department. You know, when Matt was doing the original series, it was like him and maybe 2 other guys. You know, he had his brother Richard, and you know, so Matt ended up doing a lot of the designing himself, and there's a thread of consistency that runs through everything. And you'll see it in the examination room here as well. Drawing technique was so rudimentary that it had to be a great design to get approved because it was so simply delineated. You know, you wouldn't be fooled by the beauty of all the line work. If you look at like the Star Trek sketchbook or any of Matt's drawings, they're all very, very simplistic. And I think that's part of the reason why they still look wonderful. You know, these monitors here, in 1966, this was just like beyond belief. People were flipping out. The whole idea that it would scan you and take readings. A lot of the stuff on the show isn't so science fiction anymore, you know? But Matt had such a wonderful eye, and it took itself so seriously that even though it's been kind of left behind by contemporary technology, it doesn't matter. You still love it, you still go with it. And that's an incredible accomplishment. There are so many science fiction shows from the 60s, you watch them now, and it's just, you know, I mean, look, I love Lost in Space, but, you know, basically it verges on being pretty silly. This was always, you know, Matt was designing for Gene Roddenberry, who was a science fiction fan, and Gene was serious about it. It was never silly to him. And he, although he loved science fiction and knew he was doing science fiction, he never treated it as if it was science fiction. And that's the reason why this stuff still looks amazing. The other interesting thing about Sickbay is that Sickbay grew as the show went on, because you would get inventory that was left over from other shows, and where would it go? It would end up in Sickbay. Like this is from What a Little Girl's Made Of, when they're making the androids. You know, that ended up in here. You'll see especially in Dr. McCoy's office and in the lab, and we'll take a look at that. Don't feel like you have to rush or anything, you know. But if we go this way. I chewed my gum down to nothing.
When you look, was iconic.
What's that?
That's iconic. That's
iconic.
Iconic.
It's iconic. It is. But you know, you say to yourself, it's one thing to have an iconic thing here and there. It would have been enough if it was just the Enterprise that was iconic. But then there's like one iconic thing after the other. I mean, did he make a deal with the devil? And this is, as James likes to say, this is the Geico Gecko for your health insurance up here. You know, I asked John Dwyer what the hell that was, and he couldn't remember it. Now, I mean, it's like this, which is still being constructed, was the couch from Kirk's in his apartment in Court Martial. When they got done with that episode, it went into McCoy's office, became a waiting room couch. You know, one of the other things I loved about Matt that he understood was that it was important to make these designs look like they were beyond the technology that we knew, or they understood things about materials, or that we didn't understand yet. If you look at the Enterprise, the cell struts are so spindly. I've had people say, that's ridiculous. Those things could never support the engines. And I say, now hold on a second. You're looking at this the wrong way. What those tell me is that those guys are so advanced, they understand things that we don't know anything about yet. And you can see it in this table. The table legs give a floaty appearance that uses balance to support the table and gives you the feeling that it defies gravity. We saw that a lot in Star Trek The Next Generation. Herman Zimmerman was the production designer. Andy Probert was the lead illustrator on it with Rick Sternbach. Those guys were big original series fans, and they wanted to put as much of the original show into the designs as they could. If you look at the consoles on Next Generation, for instance, the transporter console is exactly one of these legs. You'll have the console, and it'll come down like this and like that. It defies gravity. It looks like it floats. If you look at the con and ops station on the bridge, they look like they float. They defy gravity. It's the same with the rail on the bridge on the Enterprise D. To give that feeling of a technology beyond our own is so important. I thought that kind of got lost in, say, for instance, on Voyager, where if you look at the bridge, all of the consoles are big cabinets that are solid all the way down to the floor. To me, and the other thing about them is that the interesting part of the console is away from the camera. You have to get behind it to look and see what's going on. If you look at the bridge on Matt's Enterprise, every readout is where the audience can see it. It's for the audience. Don't hide it. Voyager lost that a little bit, I thought. TNG knew that. Leonard Nimoy was really wonderful at that. When he used his tricorder, he held the business side towards the audience. He was the only actor who did it. Look at the other actors. They all turned it so that they could read it. Nimoy would hold it like this and look down because he knew this thing wasn't for him. It was for the audience. So he turned the business side towards the audience. It's brilliant, really brilliant, you know. And it's a shame when the other guys didn't. And if I was Nimoy, I wouldn't tell him either, you know, because I want to be different. He made himself different from everyone else, and all actors try to do that, you know. But yeah, God, I love it. You see this? James couldn't find the screen. He got PVC piping and cut all of these out, rings, and they glued them all together. That's crazy. That's my kind of crazy.
Dear mother. Sorry.
You know, now this is another example of repurposed stuff that ended up in sickbay and just works beautifully. This is one of the cryo sleep chambers from the Khan episode, Spacey. It was put in here. It works beautiful. It's like an apothecary stasis cabinet. You know, it's great. This was from A Dagger of the Mind. It was the console that was used to control the Mind Ripper. You know, not the Mind Ripper, but you know what I'm talking about. Of course you do.
Neural neutralizer.
Neural neutralizer. Look how beautifully those work together. You know, Matt was able to take divergent things and see that if you put them together, they made something beautiful. And that's what this is. You know what I love? This crazy thing. It was originally seen in Baylock's ship. You know, when they walk in and they see little baby Baylock, this thing is to the left of them. And what's interesting, I didn't know, that James told me, was that this is actually from My Favorite Martian. It was one of Uncle Martin's tools that he used on the show. I never knew that. I don't know how many of you know, I have Uncle Martin's spaceship in my garage. I do, I swear to God, full size.
They've seen it.
Full size,
Yeah,
they've seen
yeah,
it.
we've seen it.
But you know where this piece is a reproduction, but you know where it came from? Did you see the William Shatner roast on Comedy Central where they had Clint Howard back as Baylock? Ha 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 ha! They made that for that show, and James was able to get it. It's really beautiful. It's wonderful. So yeah, this is another perfect example of repurposing of stuff, and it saves a lot of money, and look at how amazing it is. I love the decompression chamber, which is over. They're still building it, but this is another example of Matt Jeffrey's ability to put simple shapes together, easy to make, inexpensive, economical, and that looks freaking cool. And he always went above and beyond. I mean, this thing had a double door that opened up. They didn't need to do that. Why did they? They could have saved a lot of money not to, have a second door. The other interesting thing to note is that Space Seed was shot in like the last group of 5 episodes. It was the end of the season. So to lavish money on building something like this, when you didn't even really know if you were going to come back, they knew, and Bob Justman was the keeper of the money, Bob knew that this was a dramatically important piece because Khan uses it to torture Kirk. But something tells me they might have had a pretty good idea they were going to come back for a second year. Doing a show like the 2-part Menagerie, which cannibalized the pilot, was probably one of the ways they got to build that because they saved money. They put money back into their budget by coming up with that brilliant idea of making the double show using the pilot. That was really a genius, a wonderful show. It's iconic, and it saved them a ton of dough. So yeah, love it. What should we do? Oh, should we see if the transport? Well, you know what? We'll head back to the transporter. But on the way, we've got Kirk's quarters, and we got the briefing room. So we should stop in there first. Come on in, everybody. Captain's not here, he won't care. Where is he anyway?
It's more highly lit than your show.
Yeah. One of the things I love about this set is that there's a couple of sets on the show where, to me, it's obvious it's a ship or like a sailing vessel. These ribs that come down, and they're very prominent in the briefing room, as you'll see. Those look very nautical to me. But the other thing that they do is that they give you the feeling that space is at a premium. Although we have a lot of, open space on the Enterprise. But to me, this is like a cabin on a sailing ship. Like if you watched Horatio Hornblower and you saw his cabin at the back of the ship, it would remind you of that. What I find really interesting about this set, about Kirk's quarters in particular, is that Kirk, the set dressing, and I, it's a question I never asked John Dwyer. I wish I had. It says almost nothing about Kirk. It's very Spartan. There's very little in here. There's only a few items. And here's a guy who is very confident, and you feel like he knows who he is, but he doesn't want to share too much of that with you because he's your commanding officer. And what he represents is his duty, the service, and his ship. So it's kept very, very Spartan. If you look at Spock's quarters, it's very, very highly dressed, ebullient. There were, drapes and Gothic sculptures, and the harp, and the bells from Amok Time are in there, and it says loads and loads about who Spock is. And they mostly did that. Whatever, Uhura's quarters had an African motif. Marla MacGyver was very creative, and she was a historian, so there were paintings and historically oriented stuff in her quarters. But Kirk kept who he was pretty much to himself. Hey, what's really, you see this? See that? You see that? This is the real one. This is the one from the show. James was able to get a hold of it. It belonged to William Shatner for years. and he gave it away and ended up here, which is exactly where it should be. This is a reproduction. Boy, it's a great one too. And I think that Barbara Luna's Tantalus Field is behind that. Barbara Luna is like, James, we did a New Voyages episode that had Luna in it, and that's how I met Luna. And Luna has become, she's like one of our best friends now, and she is loony. She is so crazy and so funny. But, gee, I wish she was here now. But anyway, that bed there, Matt had that in his, the real one. I don't know where it is now, but he had that in his attic till just before he died. He says, yeah, I just look at Kirk's bed in my attic. Getting that disinfected. But it's just crazy that one set after the other. I know that Matt had no time and no money. How did he hit it so perfectly out of the ballpark? It really is amazing. Okay, I want to say this for the new people. Oh my God, this is amazing. This is it. It's the wonderful thing about it. And here we are again with these nautical ribs that run across the ceiling and scoop down here. And I remember as a kid, the cant on this wall, I look at it and I go, that's just like the leading edge of the saucer. Maybe we're at the edge of the saucer. So it made you feel like you were on a ship. And mostly thanks to this stuff. These things are absolutely astonishing. I made a model of the briefing room for Deep Space Nine that was about this big. And we made these beams and this wall and this thing and put lights in it. And it was because Gary Hutzel, when he did that show, when Kirk is bowling out everybody, I want to know who started it. When he's bowling out everybody, we've got Bashir and we've got O'Brien there. Actually, if you count the number of feet, there's one set of feet too many, because they took some. But anyway, I had to build this section of wall as a miniature because Gary shot those guys against a green screen. And then he took the miniature and used that to put behind them. Another thing is this, and I just said to these guys before you got here, oh my God, this is an amazing set. No, what's so incredible is that one guy with so little time and so little money can hit it out of the park time after time after time. I mean, even when it comes down to doing this conference room table. One of the things that Matt was always concerned with was using shapes that were out of the ordinary. If you went into a conference room in an office, the conference table would just be a rectangle. Matt didn't want to do a rectangle. He did. Here you've got these really unusual Matt Jeffrey shapes happening again. But not just interesting looking, but it gave Jerry Finnerman the ability to set up really interesting shots, shooting across people and getting really interesting angles on everybody. The human eye gets weary really easy. And when you have things like this happening, the eye does not tire. And I remember as a kid when I saw this, in 1966, a computer was huge. It was gigantic. I mean, it was like a computer would be like 4 of these rooms together. The idea of a desk, this is the forerunner of the computer you've got at home on your desk. In 1966, this was crazy. Of course, the interesting thing was that computers were so alien to us at the time that only an alien could really understand them. So Spock, you always felt the computers were Mr. Spock's computers. Mr. Spock, Kirk even said it, Spock's computers, Spock's computer system. What I love when we did TNG, Mike Okuda was sure to bring along the library computer. On the show, on the original series, on this show, they called it the library computer. On Next Generation, it became the LCARS, which was the Library Computer Access Retrieval System, which is just freaking Mike Okuda. I love him. But and this says so much. Not only was it way beyond anything that we could imagine at the time. I mean, if you were a science fiction fan, you know it's coming. That's why it was on the show. But the fact that they would take the time to make it beautiful. It was really just a lovely design. It's really, really, wow. And once again, I got to say, it has more to do with the fact that Matt never over-rendered his drawings. They were always very simplistic, direct, and to the point. And that's why they still look good. I've seen a lot of stuff that in the illustrations looks beyond belief beautiful. And a few years later, you don't buy it anymore. Anyway, yeah, another masterpiece. How many times can he do it? Hey, look at that. This is mine. I did this. This is my patch. I did this patch. and he's got one on his shirt. I've seen it. Where are we going? Part of the thing is that Matt never got too hung up with trying to, a lot of shows that had a lot of money would buy surplus and redress it and paint it. And then a few years later, you know what it looks like? Surplus. Because Matt couldn't afford any of that stuff, he came up with all of these designs that didn't look like anything you'd seen before. For you people just coming in, oh my God, this amazing set. It really is remarkable. And once again, another set that is just iconic of the show. Everyone knows who this is. I don't care who you are. You see it, you know what it is. It's like the Enterprise itself. Everybody knows what the Enterprise looks like, even if they don't even like science fiction. But one of the beauty of this set, aside from the wonderful angles and lines that are so distinctly Matt Jeffries, is that having the transporter elevated in a chamber with the console slightly offset, it's vaguely dangerous. You don't want to mess around with this thing. In the original pilot, the sound it made was blah, 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 blah. It was like, don't get too close to it, And use it to make microwave popcorn. But, these pads were actually Fresnel lenses from Studio Lights. The interesting thing about them is that when we did Next Generation, they had the originals from original series. The real one, the ones from the show, and we put them in the ceiling. I think that one of the producers has them now. They're still around. I think that it's possible that Ron Moore has them. On Next Generation in the conference room, you know how they used to have the ships on the wall, which I love that. I wish they didn't take them out. When they did the final Next Generation episode, All Good Things, they had to recreate that set, and they still had all of that stuff stored away. And so we put them back. After the show was going to, those sets were being torn down after the movie Generations, and they were going to start building Voyager there. And me and one of the guys from the art department were walking between the stages, and all those giant gold ships were next to a dumpster. They were going in the dumpster. And we picked them up and brought them back to the art department. I got a picture of all of us holding them up. But we gave them to Ron Moore. Ronald Moore, who did Galactica and stuff like that. He's got them, and they're on his wall now in his home. They're still around. But, and another thing is this console. This is another incredible example of Matt Jeffries' line work, his incredible economy of line, able to design something that cost almost nothing to build. This is all very simple. Now, in the original pilot, they used the helm from the bridge for the transporter console. If you ever watch The Cage again, take a look. It's the helm console. The helm console is such a, I'm getting tired of saying this, masterpiece of design that you wouldn't think this guy could do another console that just knocks you out. But look at this. This is just, it's just gorgeous. I mean, like I said, if they had had enough money to buy surplus, this would look horrible today. But the fact that they had these little, interesting little Tandy buttons because they couldn't afford any of that stuff, Matt had to come up with solutions that were simple and inexpensive. And because of that, he did stuff that didn't look like anything else. And because it didn't look like anything else then, now, it doesn't seem dated. It's really, my God, beautiful. Just that one show. The one beautiful. Show, they're really beautiful. It's just amazing. I used to love the way Scotty would get underneath this thing like he was changing the oil in the car. That was fantastic. But, the actors added a lot to it as well. If you watch Jimmy Doohan work the slider, and I love the slider because it's almost like he's drawing their molecules into the buffer. He's squirting them back out. But, like I said, where Leonard Nimoy knew to hold it tricorder so that the business side was facing the audience, people who should enjoy it. When Jimmy Doohan used to use that slider, he used to put a little English on it. It wasn't just a direct draw. He would push it up slowly and then voom, at the end. And it gave the impression that it took a certain amount of skill to do it. If he didn't do it just that way, he might lose everybody, you know? But when you have really experienced actors who really understand their craft, they add subtext to everything. That the closer you look, you start to notice things, and it makes the world seem even more real. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
That piece there, is that supposed to be artwork in the transporter room, or was that something scientific?
I always thought, I mean, to me it was just artwork. You know, I mean, Okuda and I could never come up with a technological reason for it. It just looked like a piece of artwork on the wall. It was nice. It was only there for like the first part of the first season, I think.
I'll ask you just one question as well about the sliders.
Yeah.
When this was designed by Matt Jeffries, did he have an idea that the sliders would be the thing that energized people? Was that James Doohan deciding that's
That
what
I
to do?
don't know.
Because
That's
that's
a good
interesting.
question.
Putting all those buttons there, did anyone actually think about
Yeah.
how
I mean,
it
if
worked?
Jimmy came up with that, it's really brilliant.
It's a brilliant idea.
Yeah. See this guy on the wall over here? These were left over from the pilot episode. They used to have these gooseneck viewers on everywhere, on the helm, everywhere you went, there were those things. Why they got rid of them, I really don't know. Maybe they broke too easily, or maybe the director of photography thought that they were an issue when he was trying to get a shot of somebody. You know, they're in the way, or, you know. But one of them made their way down here. I really love those. I thought they were wonderful. But I'll tell you, the inspiration for those, and the inspiration for a lot of this stuff was in 1964, 1965 New York World's Fair, where when I watched the show, and especially if you look at Starbase 11, you know, the mushrooms, the buildings that look like mushrooms, if you look at that, and you look at the New York World's Fair, and you look at the New York State Pavilion, it's Starbase 11. It's exactly Starbase 11. I think Albert Whitlock painted that matte painting. I'm pretty sure it was Albert Whitlock. I always told Mike that I thought that the New York World's Fair was ground zero for Star Trek design. And we went out with Matt one night, and we were talking, and I said, say, Matt, because I don't think Mike believed me. I don't think Okuda believed me. And I said, say, Matt, did you ever get to the 64 World's Fair? He goes, oh my God, yeah. And we worked our feet off, and we were exhausted, and I came back, and he says, and when I got home, there was a message from a guy named Roddenberry, and I kicked Mike under the table. I knew it! But, yeah, so Bell Telephone in the Bell Telephone Pavilion had desktop telephones that were exactly that. Exactly. If you go on Google and you type in Bell Telephone Desktop Viewer 1960s, you'll find it. I'm serious. Now, that design also made its way onto Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. If you looked at Admiral Nelson's quarters, it was an exact duplicate. And in Fantastic Voyage as well, they were in Fantastic Voyage. But that was definitely influenced by Bell Telephone's original concept for a desktop TV. Yeah, man. Hey, let's go this way. Oh my God, is this iconic? Oh my God.
The most iconic.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, you know, now they're still building this. And the Jeffries tube, I mean, I think that even, you know, a bear in the North Woods knows what a Jeffries tube is. It's really remarkable. It's simple, it's economical, and it says everything. You know, when I was a kid and I saw this angle here, I was like, does this go up the nacelle, up the struts of the nacelle? You know, it gave me that feeling. But, and what was wonderful is, here again, these steps, it's those Matt Jeffries, and it almost looks like the cogs on a gear, you know, which says engineering to me. But the one interesting thing I got to point out is that these pipes right here, I'm sure you all remember Jimmy Doohan swinging out like Tarzan when he would come out of here. This is a very B-17 thing, and I'm sure that Matt knew that, and I'm sure that when Roddenberry saw it, he was delighted. But the forward hatch on a B-17, that's how you come out. You come out feet first. And when I see Jimmy Doohan swinging out of there, it's just like a guy egressing a B-17. It's just amazing. You know, I wrote an article for one of the Star Trek magazines about all of the little bits and pieces on the Enterprise, the ship itself, that I could draw a direct line to the B-17, the intercoolers, and you know, it influenced so much. You know, when you have guys like that working on something, the practicality is number one for them. We built one of these for the Mirror episode on Enterprise, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely gorgeous, stunningly beautiful. And then you have to watch it all being taken down, you know? It's really, you can't believe it, especially when it's so iconic. Iconic! But, turn around and look at that. Now, what I want to say about engineering before you even get in there is that this is a masterpiece of using lenses and forced perspective models. Take a look at this. I mean, first you'll be amazed at how small it is in person. This thing looks the size of like a gymnasium on the show. I've been on shows where you need help from the DP. You need help with the light. Like if you're doing a prosthetic makeup, it's a camera trick. It's not skin. Light doesn't diffuse through it. You go to the DP and you say, we need some help here. We need you to put some nice warm amber light on them. And the director gets up on his high horse and the DP says, I am the author. I actually had the DP say this to me. I'm the author of the cinematography. Which means I could go take a hike, you know. When you get a DP and an art director who work together, you've only got this tiny little space here, and you're going to make it look as big as a gymnasium. It's amazing. And one, it's this incredible forced perspective model here. That is just a work of genius. Look how tiny it is. And you look at the show, and you swear it goes back 150 feet.
That just ruined
and the radiation, get out, spark. But so with the proper lenses, you've seen shots of airplanes on the tarmac where all the tails of the planes are all jammed together. That's like a 150 millimeter lens. It like truncates everything. If you use like an 18 or something like that, it opens things up and makes them look larger. So when Jerry Finneman shot this stuff, and they also, for Enemy Within, they built these big dynamos that were over here, that were built specifically for Evil Kurt to lurk around. But when you set the camera up here, and you shot across those dynamos, and you shot through that screen, all of that stuff worked together to make that look enormous. I look at it and I still can't believe it. When we did Trials and Tribulations, we were going to do them on the original stage 8 and 9 at Paramount. We were so excited. They had renumbered the stages. 8 and 9 are now over on the other side, and that's where the TNG sets were, which is ironic. But as soon as we got the keys to the stage, Okuda and I grabbed blueprints from the original series, went on the stage and said, this is where it was. And then we laid the blueprints down and started saying, okay, the transporter room was around here, Dr. McCoy's sickbay was over here. And when we got to engineering, and we saw how much space, you know that the back exit to the stage is right behind that, right behind it. You ever see those shots of them having the barbecue behind the stage? It was right out there. This came much later, and this is a dilithium crystal articulation frame, or as we named it on TNG. On Next Gen and the motion picture and stuff, we had a vertical warp core that also ran horizontal in the motion picture. Okuda and I always, if you watch TNG, there was that big pot belly that had the articulation frame that came out that the dilithium was in. That's what this is. The warp core is under the deck, and it runs way off that way, and it runs way off that way. And basically, now I know when Franz Joseph did his blueprints, he put engineering at the back of the primary hull, which I never agreed with that. I never understood that. And I got it from Matt. I said, okay, because the fans actually argued about it. Franz Joseph says it's in the, and people can get pretty irate sometimes. And I said, Matt, where was engineering? He goes, oh, it's in the engineering section. Of course. But what I loved about this, and this is really something that Okuda and I came up with, and that really works beautifully, is that these are gigantic power transfer conduits. And they're plasma accelerators as well. So we got to make up things like that. But see, the beauty of it is this. These power transfer conduits, go up this way to that nacelle. These power transfer conduits go up this way to that nacelle. And it makes perfect sense. And when we did, I did some really detailed diagrams of the Constitution class for the mirror episode that appears on the viewing screen. And I laid those out for Matt Jeffries, and he looked at them and he was like, absolutely, he loved it, you know. Actually, he thought I was out of my mind, you know, to nail all that down. But, you know, I mean, Mike and I used to love showing him to what extent we would go, you know, to recreate. And he never, you know, to us, he was just a freaking genius. And that never really sat well with him. He never saw himself. Very modest guy, you know. And to him, this was not a work of genius. And it would be forgotten in a couple of years. I mean, it was a TV show that only lasted 3 years. You know, and look at this is crazy. But it's the economy of design that made this possible, you know. It's because it was so beautifully and economically designed, people are able to build replicas of it without breaking the bank. Oh my God, it's amazing. Matt, are you up there looking down at this? I'm sure he must be not believing it. I'm going to say it one more time. Oh my gosh! This incredible set! You know, it's a funny thing. Someone sent me a link on the internet, just like yesterday, I guess. I'd seen it before. Someone took a shot from the original series, and they rotoed out the set and put it in their own set design. And for me, it was horrifying. You know, it was like, technically, he did a wonderful job. I mean, it really was amazing what a great job he did, but why would you want to replace this set? Okay, the technology that's represented here, for us at this point, even now, is pretty archaic. But because it's so beautifully designed and so economically designed and so to the point, and there's nothing frivolous about it, and the more you look at it, the more thought out it seems. That's why you continue to buy it, because of that. The more you look at it, the better it gets. The more you look at it, the more you realize that nothing was taken for granted. Every little thing was thought out. The whole bridge is based on human kinesiology. The sweep of the buttons is based on the kinesiology of the sweep of a human arm. And many people design consoles for science fiction shows that don't take that into account at all. This does. And without even being told, you realize it when you sit there. The eye-level consoles. I mean, look, Kirk can do a complete 360 in his chair and see every console on the bridge. How many bridge designs that you see in other science fiction shows or command centers that do that? Usually, it's all about what they think is cool and what's science fiction. This is so well thought out. Kirk can see everything that's going on on the bridge. He's got communications right behind him. He's got his data and intelligence information directly to his right. He's got engineering. Stations, everyone! But, you know, the thing was that it's a wonderful design, and I think it just literally can't be beat. We've designed some really wonderful bridges, and we based all our bridges on this bridge. But the one thing that's different about this set compared to all the others was that this set really was not made for speed. It was the one set that was the hardest to shoot in, and they spent the most time here. And that's because of the split level. To move a camera dolly around this set was a real pain. When we did Next Generation, Bob Justman returned, and when they and he learns from his mistakes. Now, I don't think this is a mistake. I love this, and I'm glad that it turned out the way it did. But if you look at the D bridge, it's a ramp. You could roll that dolly right up the ramp and follow somebody. You can't. Back then, they had big, heavy dollies, and even using a crane was difficult. So if you wanted to, you know, Steadicam. There was no such thing as Steadicam. I mean, I think that on I Spy, they used a lot of handheld camera, and the camera guy used to literally strap the camera to his head when he used it. So in a way, it was a Steadicam, but he was using his own neck and had to do it with. you know, when we were doing, we only built a section of the bridge for the Deep Space Nine episode, and if we needed a shot on the other side of the bridge, we would just change out the graphics here and shoot it as if it was the other side of the bridge. And they actually did that on the original show. There's a couple of shots where Spock is reporting to the captain, and he's not over there. He's actually over here. But the thing was that they had the side of the bridge lit already. So he kept over here. The beauty of the, you know, the repeating design, one, you've got one of these and you basically got them all. You design one of them and you could give it to the mill and the mill could build it 4 times or whatever, you know, how many sections there were. You know, what's really wonderful, once again, like I said, these little buttons, if they had the money to buy surplus, it would really, really look dated. But because this is outside of our experience, it still looks futuristic. I still buy it, you know. Now, all of these things were cast out of novelty ice cube trays for exotic drinks that they dug up. And Jimmy Rugg used to pour those buttons up out of acrylic. When we did our shows for DS9 and Enterprise, we had the original molds from TOS, and we poured all our buttons up out of the original molds. You know, even the way these buttons are laid out, they're so beautifully arranged, not just to the eye, but the spread of your hand. I'm just having you know, I'm having an out-of-body experience just looking at this. You know, I did all these panels. Well, I originally did, when James first started, when we did Deep Space Nine, and Bob Blackman, the costume designer, was talking to James because he knew that James knew more about the uniforms than anybody. The material, the collar material, where it came from, how he could get it. And James wanted to talk original series. And Bob, he appreciates the original series, but he's not really a geek. And Bob said, you know, if you want to talk original series, you need to talk to Doug Drexler. And he put James through to me in the art department. And that was the beginning of our friendship. And at that time, I think he had this built. That's all there was. And Okuda and I laid out every one of these panels. And you know, if they're not right, a miss is as good as a mile on these things. You know there's something wrong. It's really true. So I sent James an extra set. You know, when you make something on the show, you don't make just one. If something goes wrong, you're in trouble. When the show was over, I sent James a set of these, and he still uses them in his portable bridge from way back then. And you know, when we did these, we had a full color printer at the Paramount Sign Shop, and I could have them print them out with diffusion on the back, all ready to go. Just cut them out and stick them on. When Matt did these, he did black and white art. He sent it out to a photostat house where they made a film negative of it. It's just like a black and clear film neg. And then he would take each one of them and use, if you look up at that light up there, you see the gel in front of that light? They would take those gels and with spray adhesive, he would cut out each individual square of color and spray glue it on. It took forever. And then after that, you would put a piece of diffusion on the back, and then you would mount it to the press. Really astonishing. You know, I mean, I remember in some of the early shows, you could see the paper wrinkling on these things as the light was scraping across them. And what they've done here is really, really a wonderful upgrade, you know, where it doesn't take away at all from what they had, it only improves it. You know, when we did the bridge for the Defiant in the Enterprise episode, Herman wanted to spruce up a couple of things, and Mike and I were okay with it because it wasn't the Enterprise. So Herman, for instance, the rail on that ship is not segmented like this. It's actually a sweep. I personally didn't think it improved anything, but it did add a little bit of a candy coating to the whole thing, you know. But anyway, you know, one thing I would like to say in closing here is there was something that Gene Roddenberry said that I never forgot, and I just think is so wonderful, and I'd like to read it. And It's, what is the Enterprise? Well, if at first glance you said it was a spaceship, you'd be mighty right. But Gene said that the Starship Enterprise is not a collection of motion picture sets or a model used in visual effects. It is a very real vehicle, one designed for storytelling. You, the audience, furnish its propulsion, and with a wondrous leap of imagination, you make it into a spaceship that can take us into the far reaches of the galaxy and sometimes even in the depths of the human soul. And that's really Gene Roddenberry all over.